Greetings, fellow painters! Today we're going to paint the red patent leather attire of Scarlet Witch for the Marvel Zombies board game. This video tutorial is a direct follow-up to our Paint a Red Cape video, where I discuss mixing blue acrylic paint with the red midtone color of the cape to create a natural-looking purple shadow. As such, I'll spend less time demonstrating how to paint the cape in this video, and most of our time will be spent on painting the rest of the model. Of course, you can always check out our Paint a Red Cape video for detailed painting instruction on the cape. Welcome to Trehane Miniatures. We begin with a model fully primed in black, then we'll take some flat blue model color and mix it with bold pyrrole red to get a suitable color for our purple shadows. Generally speaking, blues tend to overpower reds when the two colors are mixed together. Therefore, it's best to start with a healthy amount of red for the base of the mix and then add small amounts of blue until you achieve the desired purple color. Every part of the Scarlet Witch figure from the neck down will get a coat of this purple. The purple is thinned a bit with water so that it dries a little translucent, which will leave it appearing as a nice dark shadow color. After it dries, a second coat will be applied everywhere except for the deepest shadow areas to boost the intensity of the purple. For the next step, we'll add more pyrrole red to the existing purple mix. I'm not adding any more blue to this, and we want to have more red than purple in this mix. This will result in a deep red color, and this will be our first transition from the purple shadows. This deep red color will be applied over all of Scarlet Witch's garments that we had previously painted purple, with the exception of her upper thighs, upper chest, and shoulders. These areas will be painted pink after we finish up the red clothing. I'm going to avoid painting over some of the purple in the deep shadow areas. When painting next to these shadows with the dark red, I begin the stroke in the purple shadow area and finish the stroke at a point on the red garment that I want to be the brightest. Since more paint will be deposited at the end of the stroke than at the beginning of the stroke, this should help create a natural blend from the darker purple area to the lighter red area. I'm leaving some purple unpainted on the back side of her legs and torso and in some of the deep creases in her cape. Now we will start to shape our highlights using pure bold pyrrole red. These highlights will be focused on upward and outward facing bits of each feature of the model, as well as any prominent folds in the cape. We will work within the borders of the previous dark red layer and follow the same approach to applying the paint as we did when we painted the dark red over the purple. We will leave some of the dark red showing on the downward and side facing surfaces and draw our strokes from the dark red edge to the high point or center of each feature. For example, on the boots, I'll paint the bright red starting from each side of the thigh and finish the stroke at the front center portion of the thigh. Even though I'm going to use the same red for the Scarlet Witch's headpiece, I'm avoiding painting it at the same time as the rest of her garments. This is because I want to have a more metallic texture to it instead of the patent leather look that I'm going for on her boots, bustier, and gloves. I don't want to work on autopilot and accidentally paint the headpiece in the exact same manner that I'm painting the rest of her clothing. For the final highlights, we'll add ice yellow to the pyrrole red. We'll do this in two stages. For the first stage highlight, we'll use a very small amount of ice yellow in the red. This will result in a slightly pink hue, which will be barely perceptible when painted over the red. We're going to apply these highlights over a relatively small portion of the red garment. This is so that the garment looks more red than pink. We're also going to radically jump up in value with the next highlight, adding more ice yellow to the mix. We're going to paint rather small, bright highlights on the surfaces that would catch the most light. Highlighting a small area with very bright highlights will make the material look shiny like red patent leather. It's very similar to the way that you would highlight non-metallic metal. The main difference between creating a shiny or wet-looking material and creating non-metallic metal is mostly in the shadows. The shadow area of the patent leather won't be nearly as large or as dark as it would be if we were painting it to look metallic. I've switched to a size 1 sable brush for these detailed highlights. I'm no longer drawing continuous strokes. I'm applying the highlights with short, perpendicular strokes and stippling. I'm also edge highlighting the boots, bustier, and gloves. I will also occasionally go in and glaze in some pyrrole red if I feel that I've made some of the highlights too large. This wraps up the red clothing, and with that, most of our work is done. We're moving on to the small pink areas found on her upper thighs and shoulders. For this, we're going to use Magenta Pro Acryl. We're starting over the purple base color that will act as our shadow color. The magenta paint will be applied in the same manner that we've been using all along, where we draw each stroke from the shadow area to the brightest part of each feature. There isn't much surface to cover here, so this is going to go pretty quickly. To highlight the pink clothing, we'll simply add some ice yellow to the magenta Pro Acryl. Once again, these final highlights will be added with short strokes and some stippling. These highlights won't be as bright as the highlights on the red clothing because we want the pink clothing to have more of a satin look rather than something too shiny. We're going to move on to some dark plum Pro Acryl for the base of her skin. We're going to apply one simple base coat of this to her entire face, and this will act as the shadow color for her facial features. Next, we'll add Elven Flesh by the Army Painter to the dark plum. This will be thinned pretty well with water because we want to blend smoothly with the existing dark plum layer. This means that we'll have to apply it in a couple of coats. First, we'll apply this thin flesh tone to pretty much her entire face except for the deep recesses like her eyes and lower hairline around her neck. Then we'll apply a second coat to accentuate the prominent features of her face like the cheeks, chin, and the bridge of her nose. The final highlight for the face will be achieved with pure Elven Flesh, which is a very light flesh tone with a slight yellow hue to it. This too will be thinned with water and applied in a few coats to achieve a smooth blend. We're going to build these highlights up, focusing almost solely on the bridge of her nose, her right cheek, and chin, though her left cheek will receive one thin and somewhat small coat of this to make it stand out from the rest of the left side of her face. The Scarlet Witch's lips will be painted very simply with a coat of Pyrrole Red, followed by a mix of Pyrrole Red and Ice Yellow to add a glint of light to her bottom lip. This highlight color will be mostly Ice Yellow with just a touch of red added. As I'm finishing her lips, I notice that the shadow under her right cheek is looking a little too extreme, so I decide to glaze in the dark plum and Elven Flesh mix to soften this shadow and ease the transition to her cheek highlights. I'm using German Camo Black Brown as the base for her hair, including her eyebrows. I'm not worried about getting the black brown into every nook and cranny in her hair. A little black primer deep in the recesses will make a fine extreme shadow color. I'm also going to use the black brown as a base for her red metal headpiece, which I just learned is called a wimple. I know that sounds made up, but I read it on the internet, so it has to be true. I'm thinning the black brown so that it doesn't perfectly cover the wimple. The black brown will dry very dark, but it will still make it easier to paint the red than painting over pure black. Orange brown model color will be used for the first highlight in the hair. We'll use a heavy dry brush or wet brush approach to applying these highlights. Sticking with our size 1 brush will remove most of the paint from the brush, but it will still contain more paint than if we were truly dry brushing. Then, using the side of the brush, we'll apply highlights to the raised curls of Scarlet Witch's hair in a halo pattern around the top of her head. And we'll do this to a few strands of hair on each side of her face. We'll do this again for the locks at the midway point down the length of her hair. And finally, we'll highlight the curls at the ends of her hair. So we're basically painting 3 rings of light around her head. Can you guess what color we're adding to the orange brown for the final highlight? The ice yellow and orange brown mix will be applied in the same way as the orange brown, but we'll focus these highlights just in the center of the orange brown highlights. We'll follow the same 3 rings of light around her head. The strands of hair at the front will also get highlighted to frame Scarlet Witch's face. This is such an easy and effective way to paint hair. I don't know about you, but the longer I paint a miniature, the lazier I get. I seem to spend less and less time on each part of the mini the further I get into it. Getting back to Scarlet Witch's wimple, which I'm just going to refer to as her headpiece from here on out, we're going to use whole red model color as the first step for the red. When applying this color, I'm going to focus more on where I want the dark shadow to be, and I'm not going to paint those areas. I want there to be strong shadows in front of her right ear running vertically near the back edge of the headpiece. I want a shadow just left of center on the front of the headpiece, and a shadow on most of the middle area on the left side of the headpiece, meaning the model's left side. The other areas will get a thin coat of whole red. From here, we'll jump straight to bold Pyrrole Red for the midtone. We're going to leave all of the darker areas untouched and apply this color over much of the whole red. Now we're thinking about where we want our highlights. We'll focus this color on the front edges surrounding Scarlet Witch's face, as well as drawing towards each of the points, both upper and lower, on her headpiece. Adding ice yellow to the Pyrrole Red will increase the highlights. I'll edge highlight the top edges of the headpiece and the inner edges surrounding her face. Additionally, I'll add small highlights in several locations. I'll highlight each of the bottom points. I'll add a highlight following the line of the headpiece that runs along the right side of her face, and I'll draw it up to the right point at the top of the headpiece. And I'll add a highlight along the center crease near her forehead. Once this is done, I'll add small glints of light in the center edge of these highlights with ice yellow mixed with a little matte white. The base is painted ridiculously fast with 3 simple dry brush steps. First, I lay down a heavy layer of Necromancer Cloak by the Army Painter. I'm not trying to cover all of the black primer here, but I do make sure to cover any of the stray paint marks from previous steps. Then I do a heavy dry brush of Uniform Gray. This will act as the main color for the stone base. Finally, I complete the base by highlighting with a light dry brush of Ash Gray, which is also by the Army Painter. And with that, she's all done. For a detailed look at how I painted the red cape, be sure to check out this video here. Thank you so much for watching. Please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to join our growing community of painters.